the internet myth, the girls, and the descent into obsession. Welcome to the Dark History Case. Tonight, we explore a tragedy born from the darkest corners of the internet, a story where fiction became obsession, and obsession turned into a horrifying real-life crime. A story that reveals how fragile young minds can be, and how dangerous imagination becomes when it loses control. This is the story of the Slender Man Stabbing, when a digital myth stepped into reality. To understand how this happened, we must begin not with the crime, but with the creation of the character that inspired it. In 2009, on an internet forum known as Something Awful, users competed to create paranormal images. One man posted a tall, faceless figure wearing a black suit, a creature lurking behind children in eerie, edited photos. The name Slender Man appeared beneath the images, and the myth began. In just a few years, Slender Man grew into a full cultural phenomenon. He became the antagonist of online horror stories, creepypastas, video games, forums, and YouTube series. People wrote entire storylines about him, a supernatural entity who lived in forests, kidnapped children, and manipulated their minds. The more the internet fed the legend, the more real Slender Man began to feel to young and impressionable audiences. To adults, he was entertainment. But to some children, he became something else. A presence, an idea, a whisper at the edge of imagination. Among the millions who discovered Slender Man were two 12-year-old girls living in Waukesha, Wisconsin, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier. They were quiet, introverted, intelligent, and searching for meaning in the online world. Like many children, they sought escape, identity, and belonging. But they found it in a place that fed darkness instead of stability. Morgan, especially, struggled with reality. She saw the world differently. She felt emotions differently. And as investigators later learned, she was already showing early signs of a severe mental disorder. Anissa, on the other hand, was deeply influenced by what she read online. She believed stories easily. She needed to believe in something bigger than herself. Slender Man became that something. And then there was Peyton Bella Leutner, Morgan's friend since 4th grade. Bella was kind, loyal, and trusting. She never imagined her closest friends were slipping into a psychological nightmare. By late 2013, the Slender Man obsession escalated. Morgan and Anissa began reading online forums filled with fan fiction, fake sightings, and stories claiming Slender Man lived in a mansion deep in the woods. They convinced themselves that Slender Man was real, not a character, not a myth, but an actual entity that watched them. In their young minds, Slender Man became powerful. He became terrifying. He became a figure they believed they had to obey. And then something shifted. The girls became convinced that Slender Man would harm them and their families if they didn't prove their loyalty to him. Their internet-shaped delusion led them to believe they needed to make a sacrifice, a human sacrifice, to earn his protection. They believed doing so would allow them to live with him in his mythical mansion in the forest. This wasn't just imagination anymore, it was a shared psychosis, a phenomenon known as folie à deux, where two people build a delusional belief together. The target of their delusion was Bella, their best friend, a friend who trusted them, a friend who never suspected anything. For months, Morgan and Anissa planned what they believed was their mission. The plan shifted multiple times. They discussed doing it at a sleepover, at a bathroom sink, in the woods. But the intention remained the same: to get rid of Bella, to satisfy a creature that didn't exist. On May 30th, 2014, the girls acted normally at school. They laughed. They talked. They behaved like ordinary 12-year-olds. That night, Bella went to a sleepover at Morgan's house. She felt safe. She felt welcomed. She had no idea her friends were hiding a plan in the shadows. The girls painted their nails. They played with toys. They ate breakfast the next morning. Everything seemed perfect. But underneath the normal routine, a storm was brewing. A psychological collapse, fueled by fear, fantasy, and mental illness. The next morning, they decided it was time. The three walked to a park. The day was sunny, the air was warm. Children laughed in the distance. It felt innocent, calm, ordinary. But Morgan and Anissa weren't thinking about sunlight or friendship. They were thinking about Slender Man. They believed he was watching. They believed he demanded obedience. And they believed that today, they had to do the unthinkable. Their delusion was complete. Their minds were trapped. And Bella, the innocent girl walking beside them, had no idea she was walking into a nightmare. The woods, the attack, and the fight for survival. The morning sun filtered through the trees as three young girls walked together toward the woods near David's Park in Waukesha. To anyone passing by, they looked like ordinary children enjoying a warm day. But inside the minds of Morgan and Anissa, a terrifying belief took hold. The belief that Slender Man was watching them, expecting them to carry out what they called their mission. Bella had no idea her two closest friends were slipping deeper into a shared delusion. She smiled. She followed them. She trusted them completely. As they reached the edge of the woods, the ground became softer with mud and fallen leaves. The air grew colder under the shade of the trees. This quiet, isolated space became the center of one of the most disturbing crimes in modern juvenile history. Morgan and Anissa had already attempted to attack Bella once that morning in a bathroom at a nearby park. But there were too many people, too many witnesses, too much hesitation. So they led her deeper into the woods, farther away where no one could see or hear. The atmosphere shifted. Bella felt uneasy. She didn't know why. But she followed anyway, because these were her friends. Friends she trusted. Morgan and Anissa exchanged glances. Silent communication between two children who believed they had no choice. Their delusion told them that failing meant danger. They believed that Slender Man would harm them if they didn't complete the sacrifice. Then Anissa said something that Bella would never forget. "Go lie down. Morgan's going to draw on you." It sounded innocent. It sounded like a game. Bella obeyed. And then everything changed. Morgan pulled out a kitchen knife she'd hidden in her clothing. A long, sharp knife taken from her home. It's before the sleepover. She held it tightly, her hand trembling. Not from fear of the act, but from the weight of the delusion controlling her thoughts. Anissa looked at Morgan and said, "Go ballistic, go crazy." Those were the final words before reality shattered. Morgan turned toward Bella and began stabbing, fast, chaotic, uncontrolled. She stabbed her again and again, driven not by anger, but by a terrifying belief that she was serving a supernatural entity. Bella screamed. She begged. She tried to fight back, but the attack was sudden and overwhelming. Morgan stabbed Bella 19 times, each wound carrying the weight of a fantasy turned into horror. 2 wounds came dangerously close to her heart and major arteries. One stab was so deep, doctors later said that if it had been a millimeter closer, Bella would have died instantly. But somehow, incredibly, she survived the initial attack. When it was over, Bella lay on the forest floor, bleeding heavily, her body growing colder. Morgan and Anissa stood over her, unsure of what to do next. In their minds, they believed they had completed the task. They believed Slender Man would now welcome them. And then, in a shocking twist, Anissa showed a moment of hesitation, a brief flicker of humanity. Bella whispered through tears and pain, "I can't see, I can't breathe, I can't move." Anissa told her to lie still. She told her to be quiet. She told her she would get help. But it was a lie. The girls walked deeper into the woods instead, leaving their friend behind to die alone. But Bella refused to give up. Despite her injuries, despite losing so much blood, despite the agony, she used every bit of strength left in her small body to crawl. She crawled through leaves, through dirt, through pain so intense, she said later it felt like burning fire. She crawled toward sunlight, toward the sound of cars, toward life. After what must have felt like an eternity, she reached a bike path. There, she collapsed. Exhausted, bleeding, but still alive. Moments later, a man named Greg Minsa, riding his bicycle through the trail, saw something terrifying on the ground. A small girl, pale, trembling, covered in blood. He jumped off his bike and rushed to her. Bella's first words were quiet, but powerful. "Please help me. They tried to kill me." Greg immediately called 911. His voice shook as he described the scene. The operator tried to stay calm, but the urgency in her tone revealed the seriousness. Bella was conscious but fading. Her lungs were filling with blood. She was minutes away from dying. Police arrived quickly. They knelt beside her. They tried to stop the bleeding. They asked, who did this to her? Bella whispered the names of her two closest friends. 12-year-old girls, her friends, the people she trusted most. Emergency responders rushed her to the hospital. Surgeons worked frantically. They said she was unbelievably lucky. One stab missed her heart by less than a millimeter. Another missed a major artery by the thickness of a hair. Doctors later said she should not have survived, but she did. Meanwhile, Morgan and Anissa walked aimlessly toward the woods, believing they were on their way to Slender Man's mansion. They carried a backpack with granola bars, water bottles, pictures, and a map. They were preparing to walk hundreds of miles. Their delusion was complete. Their minds were no longer grounded in reality. They believed a fictional creature would welcome them. They didn't get far. Hours later, police found them near the highway, wandering, confused, and still under the influence of their shared belief. Bella was fighting for her life in a hospital. Morgan and Anissa were being taken into custody, and a community was about to face one of the most shocking juvenile crimes in American history. The interrogations, the psychology, and the dark truth behind the motive. When police found Morgan and Anissa walking near the interstate, the girls were calm, almost too calm. They weren't crying, they weren't panicking. They weren't frightened by what had just happened. Instead, they spoke with a strange, detached confidence. The kind of confidence only a delusion can create. Officers placed them in the back of separate patrol cars. They were still 12 years old. Children sitting in oversized seats, feet dangling, clothes smudged with dirt from the forest. But their minds were somewhere else entirely. At the police station, investigators questioned them separately. And what happened next shocked even the most experienced detectives. The moment the interrogation began, Anissa spoke openly. There was no hesitation, No attempt to hide anything. She explained everything in a tone that sounded disturbingly casual. She said, "We had to do it. We had to protect ourselves from Slender Man." Investigators paused. They asked her to repeat it. She did, with the same calm conviction. Anissa said, "They believed Slender Man lived in a mansion in a forest in northern Wisconsin. She said they wanted to go live with him. She said they needed to make a sacrifice to prove loyalty." The police interviewer asked her why she thought Slender Man was real. Anissa replied, "He watches you. He can read your mind. He can kill your family." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't lying. She truly believed it. Then she said something even more haunting. "I didn't want to do it, but I had to. If I didn't help Morgan, Slender Man would hurt me." It wasn't a story. It wasn't an excuse. It was a fully formed delusion, a shared belief so strong that it erased reality for 2 children. Meanwhile, in another room, Morgan spoke to detectives with a different tone, a cold, emotionless, almost distant tone. She described the stabbing with no sign of remorse, as if she was recounting a normal event. She said she felt no fear and no sadness. She said Slender Man told her what to do. She claimed she saw him sometimes. She believed he was watching her. When officers asked her if she knew Bella could have died, Morgan simply said, "I thought she would die." Then added, "I read that he likes servants." Her words sent chills through the room. Detectives realized they weren't dealing with typical suspects. They were dealing with 2 children lost inside a dangerous psychological fantasy. As the interviews continued, Morgan's mental state became clearer. She described hallucinations. She described voices. She described seeing things that weren't real. She talked about someone standing behind her. She spoke about Slender Man as though he were a real person in the room. Investigators and psychologists quickly recognized the signs. Morgan was showing symptoms of a severe mental illness, one that had never been diagnosed because she was so young. Eventually, she was diagnosed with childhood-onset schizophrenia, a rare but extremely serious condition. Her father, it was later revealed, also lived with schizophrenia. The disorder can be genetic but often remains unnoticed in children until adolescence. This explained Morgan's hallucinations. It explained her flat emotional tone. It explained why Slender Man felt real to her. But Anissa? Her situation was different. Anissa was diagnosed with a condition called shared delusional disorder, a psychological state where a vulnerable person absorbs another person's hallucinations or beliefs. Morgan's hallucinations became Anissa's reality. Morgan's fear became Anissa's fear. Morgan's delusion became their shared truth. Psychologists later called their relationship a folie à deux, a madness shared by 2. Meanwhile, doctors were fighting to keep Bella alive. She had lost nearly half her blood. Her organs were weakened. Her lungs were damaged. Her life hung by a thread. But Bella survived. She woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by her family. She asked where her friends were. She asked why they did this. Her mother had no answer. No one did. As news spread, the community reacted with shock and disbelief. Parents were terrified. Schools panicked. People asked how 2 young girls could become so lost in an online myth. Reporters flooded the area. The story went national, then international. The horror wasn't just the violence, it was the motive. The idea that an internet character could push 2 children into a near-fatal attack stunned the world. And then, the legal battle began. Because of the severity of the crime, prosecutors made a controversial decision. They charged both girls as adults, despite being only 12 years old. Under Wisconsin law, attempted first-degree homicide is automatically an adult charge. The courtroom filled with tension. Two small children in oversized clothing sat beside their lawyers, facing decades in prison. Jagged edges of reality and childhood clashed in the most disturbing way. Defense attorneys argued that both girls were deeply mentally ill. Prosecutors argued that the planning was deliberate and calculated. Psychologists testified for hours about mental illness, delusion, and the dangers of internet mythology. The family suffered through every moment. Bella's mother wept. Morgan's parents struggled to process what their daughter had done. Anissa's father spoke about the horror of losing a child in a psychological sense. The courtroom became a battlefield between reality and delusion, and the entire world watched. The trial, the sentencing, the aftermath, and the legacy of a digital nightmare. As the legal battle began, the world tried to understand how two children could fall so deeply into a shared delusion that they nearly killed their closest friend. The courtroom became a place where childhood innocence collided with psychological darkness. Two 12-year-old girls sat in adult-sized chairs, facing adult charges because the crime was too severe for juvenile court. Morgan and Anissa appeared in court wearing beige prison uniforms. Their faces were pale. Their movements were slow. Their minds were still tangled in the web of belief that had led them into the woods that morning. Psychologists testified that Morgan suffered from childhood-onset schizophrenia, a rare form of the disorder that often appears during late adolescence. But in her case, symptoms had started years earlier. Hallucinations, voices, visions, a complete break from reality. Her schizophrenia explained why Slender Man felt real. It explained why she saw him. It explained why she believed he demanded obedience. Her mind had built an entire world inside itself, and Slender Man became part of it. Anissa, on the other hand, did not hallucinate. She did not see Slender Man. She did not hear voices, but she believed, fully deeply, in Morgan's hallucinations. This is known as shared delusional disorder, or folie à deux, a psychological bond where one person's delusion becomes the other's truth. Anissa was vulnerable, impressionable, desperate for belonging, and Morgan's belief filled that void. Together, their minds became a single echo chamber, feeding each other, worsening each other, collapsing into darkness. The prosecutors faced a challenge. These were not cold-blooded criminals. They were mentally unstable children. But the crime was severe, and Bella had nearly died. The trial became a national spectacle. Experts debated whether the girls should be punished, hospitalized, or both. Their parents struggled with guilt, disbelief, and heartbreak. Some people blamed the internet. Some blamed mental illness. Some believed both forces collided in the worst possible way. After months of testimony, the court delivered its verdicts. Anissa Weier. She pleaded guilty to being a party to attempted second-degree intentional homicide. Her mental health evaluation revealed a deep dependency issues and shared delusion vulnerability. The judge acknowledged her mental fragility, but also the gravity of the crime. She was sentenced to 25 years in a mental health facility. That's not prison. With periodic reviews. Morgan Geyser. Because she initiated the attack and suffered from severe schizophrenia, her sentencing was even more complex. She pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Psychiatrists testified that without treatment, Morgan would remain a danger to herself and others. Her illness was real, severe, and life-altering. The judge sentenced her to 40 years in a mental institution with long-term psychiatric supervision. These sentences shocked many people, not because they were harsh, but because they reflected the seriousness of the illness behind the crime. The court chose treatment over punishment, but treatment that would last most of their lives. Through all of this, Bella, the survivor, became the symbol of strength the case desperately needed. Her recovery was long and painful. She underwent surgeries. She learned to breathe deeply again. She learned to walk without pain. She learned to trust again, something far more difficult than healing her physical wounds. In interviews years later, Bella spoke with incredible courage. She said she refuses to let the attack define her. She said the scars remind her of survival, not tragedy. She said she is stronger because she lived. Her words carried a quiet power. I'm not letting what happened limit me. The case had long-lasting effects on the entire world. Parents became terrified of internet myths. Schools began teaching digital literacy. Psychologists studied the impact of online horror stories on young minds. People questioned how fiction could break through reality so violently. The creators of Slender Man themselves expressed shock and sorrow. The myth had never been meant for children. It had never been intended to cause harm. It was a fictional creature, but it touched real lives in the darkest way. The Slender Man Stabbing became a symbol, a warning of what happens when imagination and mental instability collide in an unmoderated digital world. But the case also raised deeper questions. How vulnerable are children to online influence? How quickly can fantasy become obsession? How fragile is the line between innocence and delusion? And how many other children silently struggle with mental health issues that go unnoticed? Morgan and Anissa were not monsters. They were children who lost their grip on reality. Children who needed help long before the tragedy occurred. Children swallowed by a delusion so powerful it controlled their thoughts. Bella was the only innocent victim. A girl who trusted her friends and survived the unimaginable. Her survival became the light in this dark story. Proof that even in a forest filled with fear, hope can still crawl its way into daylight. And so we reach the end of this case. A myth born online. A friendship corrupted by delusion. An attack that shocked the world. A survivor who refused to give up. And two young minds forever changed by a creature that never truly existed. This is the Dark History Case, and this was the Slender Man Stabbing, when fiction became a real crime.